Hey everyone, it's me, Tim, and today I want to talk about social resolutions in RPGs. And by that I mean combat resolutions that are social, not conflict resolutions that are social. It's hard to talk about. I'm going to answer a question from Stavros Nicolaou, who's asked several questions so far on this channel. He keeps asking good questions, so I'm going to keep answering them. And he asks, how do you feel about social/peaceful resolutions in RPGs? Many RPGs tend to use social persuasion-based resolutions for quests or challenges as a one-roll, skip combat choice. Rarely games employ minigames or other forms of social combat that make these social encounters more interesting or even on par with the physical combat resolutions. Do you feel RPGs today sufficiently support the social pillar with engaging gameplay? And if not, how would you have liked it to be handled? So, I think it's pretty obvious that my answer is going to be that I like peaceful social resolutions to conflict. They've been part of every RPG I've made for the last 25 years. Fallout had one of the most famous ones where you can have that encounter with the master and you can convince him that his grand plan is going to fail because all of the mutants are sterile. Now, you just can't walk in there and say, they're sterile. Speech roll 75, I did it, bye. You have to have evidence. And I'll talk about that. But I think you're right in that a lot of games do support this one roll, skip everything. It doesn't make any sense for you to walk up to a big bad guy, a boss, perhaps the end game boss, and they give you a big monologue how they've done all this evil stuff and they're going to do more and there's no way you can stop them and they're about to do this horrible thing, and you can just go, speech 100, don't. And they stop. I think that's dumb. I don't like it, and I wish developers wouldn't do that and then claim they have, a social playthrough in their game. So, but I want to balance that. I don't really like verbal combat either. I know what you're talking about, where there are like either a mini game that you can play. I played a game once with a mini game. It was a circle. I don't remember. I want to say Bethesda made it, and it spun around and you did things. I didn't like that one either. Basically, the problem with it is not only does it feel really aggressive, so it doesn't feel like you're playing a peaceful talker guy, but usually it doesn't feel like real dialogue at all. It usually the associated text is weird. It just doesn't sound right. It doesn't make any sense to me, and my narrative bar is low. So what I always thought you needed to do in games that support dialogue based solutions to quests is the dialogue's there, but you need to support it with evidence. And I'll talk about what I think evidence is. But I also think it's important that when you do this solution, that you're told in advance that you need to find out something to use. They either tell you what they are, what the evidence is, and then you need to go find it, or they just tell you that evidence exists, and then you need to go find out what that evidence is and come back with it. It may even be the case, and I would love it if a game just, when you got to a player line, it could say, the line's grayed out, and in brackets it said like speech 75, comma, evidence. So you need some kind of evidence, and your speech has to be at least 75. So you can come back if it's important. And then there's some way out of that. You're like, I'll meet you again, Dark Lord, and then you leave and you come back. What I like about that solution is you can go collect it physically. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to do that. You could have some other person say, hey, I wouldn't go there unless you're really good at talking and you have this evidence. But either way. So then you go collect that evidence in the world. Now, I think some of it is you have to literally go find records somewhere. You have to, there's stuff you can collect that proves that you're right. This is kind of what we did in Fallout with the Master. Now, to get those records, Maybe you need to use your dialogue skills. Maybe you need to persuade someone of something. Maybe you need to lie to get past a guard to get into a record room. Maybe you need some stealth skills. Maybe you need to pick a lock or hack a computer or something. That's all fine as long as the main skills involved are speech skills. I don't mind if there's like a low value lock that has to be picked, or a simple computer that has to be hacked. I think that's cool to put up a little bit of those barriers, but the main thing should be speech. Another way of collecting the evidence is simply you get it from other people, that you have to talk to a lot of people and put this stuff together. So again, that would be going into dialogue trees with NPCs. Maybe it's scientists who have information. Maybe it's friends of the bad guy. Maybe it's relatives. Maybe it's archaeologists who have records about this has happened before and these are what the records say. But it requires you to talk to them and make speech checks in that. That's why I like having more than one speech skill. I love the persuasion, lie, and intimidate in Outer Worlds because it made it feel like, well, some people you might have to intimidate, and other people you might have to just bold-faced lie to, and other people you can persuade. Hey, why don't you just tell me it? Why don't you be cool? I thought you were cool. What I like about that is that's a pure speech solution. The evidence is out there in pieces that a bunch of different people know. You learn it all, you put something together, and then you go back to the bad guy and you're like, you're not the Dark Lord, you're Dark Lord Jr., and your dad hates you, or whatever you want to put together. So I feel like that's a fun thing because no one NPC knew the whole story about Dark Lord, but you put it all together and you go back and let him have it. Another way you could do it is maybe you're the one who creates the evidence. Maybe you run experiments. Maybe some of those experiments use science skills at a low level. Or you discover things about the bad guy. Or maybe you're literally testing things in the world. Maybe you discover a lab and you can start it up. And maybe doing certain experiments give certain values. And you're like, oh my goodness, the electron volts here are way lower than he said it would be. Or this device changes the gravimetric constant in this area. Something, and you basically gather all this data yourself. And then you go back to the bad guy and you go, guess what? Your device doesn't do what it said it did, or your device won't work, and I can prove it because you actually did those experiments. Now, whether you collect that data or talk to other people to get it, or you create that information yourself, I think that all that stuff should be balanced so that that evidence gathering part takes about as much time as the combat path or stealth path would take. And it should be just as fun. It should feel like a cool part of the game and not something that's tacked on. But what you have to do is you have to think, if a player made a dialogue-based character, he's going to like doing this stuff. So if you create a bunch of these things that could be done, then I think you could make as much fun stuff for a dialogue-based character to do the same way you come up with combat encounters or vents or locked doors or alternate paths through areas that you do for the stealth person. You can come up with these solutions for the dialogue character. And then they can have fun with this alternative way of dealing with the bad guy. And because it's not as simple as a simple roll, you avoid any of the issues where maybe someone just doesn't have a high speech skill but pops some kind of drug that makes it artificially high and then they just go through that. You also make it so this is something the person has to deliberately do. They just don't get to the end and do it. Oh, it just came up in dialogue. No, unless you tried to do this thing, you tried to collect all this evidence, you're not going to accidentally do it at the end. I think if you combine all these things together, I think you get a really interesting way of making dialogue solutions for role-playing games that feel as rich and rewarding as a combat solution or a stealth solution. And I don't think it's much more work, and I don't think it takes much more time, and I don't think it would add to dev costs significantly. It does add, because it is an extra path you're working on, but I don't think the examples I gave here require that much extra work. So anyway, I hope that answers your other, what is this, your third good question, Stavros? Anyway, keep those questions coming, and I hope this answered it.